Welcome to another episode of Beauty and the Priest. I'm Fiona.
And I'm Jim. And today what we thought we'd be talking about with you is burnout, what causes it and what we can do to help not burn out or even alleviate the symptoms and causes and such that are going on in our lives to get back into a much better rhythm of life. Yeah. So, Fiona, what is the sorts of things that causes burnout?
Well, there's different things for different people. The reason why we're having this conversation is because there's a lot of people around us, including myself, that have hit burnout and just fatigue. Now, if you're watching this in the future, this is 2022 post a couple of years of pandemic lockdowns and all the changes and upheavals in lives that went with it, which I think has been contributing to it. But my belief is just watching the behaviors and the culture and the lifestyle of people around me is that being busy has become like a status symbol. We're all wanting so many things and we've got so many goals and we think we put these expectations on ourselves that we seem to be living a lifestyle of striving. And that is not a sustainable way of living, because we're constantly striving, constantly reaching, and we're never actually just sitting for very long in our wins or in the space that we're in before we turn around and look for the next thing and the next goal and the next target. And busy has become a bit of a epidemic of its own, I think. And so your mind, your body, and your spirit can only sustain that for a certain amount of time before it just goes, ah! And then you hit burnout as a way of your body to just stop you and recover. So different things for different people. It might be work burnout. I mean, I will describe my sister, and she won't mind me doing this, but she is a busy working sports mum who is constantly running from one thing to another. And I'm like, how are you even doing this? So it might be a parent busyness, it might be work busyness, it might be your own busyness or whatever it might be. I think we've all just become way too busy because we're wanting too much. Your views?
It's very interesting because I think from a Christian theological perspective, busyness is not the normal state for a human being to be in. We see this throughout the Bible where God calls his people to rest. Yeah. That's what he does. So whether you're talking about in the Old Testament where God was going before his people, or even where there would be a battle to be fought or whatever, there are examples of where God says, no, I want you to rest. I want you to come out in songs and in musicians, send the musicians to the front, because I, your God, will fight the battle for you. And it seems counterintuitive, certainly from a worldly perspective, to just rest, and to just wait, and these things will happen. But that is our normal state of being, is to rest. But there's a difference between, I think, obviously resting and being lazy. Two very different things. So I think it's important to recognise that we're not called to be lazy, but we are called to have a stance of rest. And that is our normal state of being, to be well rested.
You look at, so I always tend to look at nature. When I'm looking at how God designed us to be, I look at nature because there's not that much difference between it. And when you look, I like to just spend some time, and the first day that this actually dawned on me, I was at a silence retreat and just watching the birds outside the window, and they were just pecking around, and then they'd fly off and like they were talking to each other, and then they'd come and pick up a stick and they'd go and put something in their nest, and then they'd just come and peck, and then they look around. And I thought, they're not striving, they're not trying to achieve any goals, they're just doing life. And when you look at, like you said, those stories in the Bible, even Jesus went out on the boat to rest, to escape from the crowds when he needed that time out to retreat. And so that should be a good example to us as well. But when we think about the way God designed us, like you said, is yes, we're meant to work hard, but not strive. We're meant to achieve, we're meant to be the person he created us to be, but not exhaust ourselves in doing so. And it's a really hard line to find in the sand between not being lazy, like you said. And because that's exactly, because when I hit burnout a couple of months ago, and I'm still not battling fatigue, I've sort of surrendered to it, but I'm just putting one foot in front of the other anyway, and using that time to rest because I see that I need it. It's almost like at the end of like 15 to 20 years of being a full-time working single mum. For most of it, I was a single mum. And it's like my kids just moved out and got married and everything at the beginning of the pandemic. And it's just all like, my body's like, okay, now you can have a rest. And it's like, oh, now I'll please God have a rest. But while I'm doing it, I am fighting that. But am I just being lazy? Am I just being lazy? Am I just being slack? And then you go to that scripture where it says, idle hands are the devil's workshop. And in if you're lazy, poverty will come on you like a thief in the night, that one there. And I'm like, oh my gosh, but do I have to be busy? I'm like, no. And what I do to undo that is, am I lazy? I go, well, look at your history. Have you ever been lazy? No, I'm up, I'm at 'em, I'm always going. So it is not me that's being lazy. I'm exhausted. So have you ever had that experience where you're like, oh, do I push through or do I surrender to the need for rest?
Yeah, so many times. I think one of the big times that springs to mind when you were saying that was there was a time in my life where things absolutely crashed down around me, and it was the end of so many things in my life. And I suffered burnout really significantly, so much so that I ended up virtually living on a couch for about 6 months, where I could barely do anything. And it could have been chronic fatigue. It could have just been burnout. It could have been the end of a season of mourning and such. And I think it's quite easy for us to treat somebody else that we would meet who is in that condition to say, mate, don't worry about it. I'll get your coffee, just lay there. But it's hard to treat ourselves that way.
Yeah.
As you just said, like there's the thing in the back of your mind when you're thinking you're being lazy. You should get up. You should do this. You should do that.
Should I push through?
No. Sometimes it's a good idea to just wait on the season, just wait and see what happens.
That's a very good word, because that's one thing that keeps coming up in the Bible for me, is waiting on God and waiting on seasons. And a lot of stuff that I've been reading, a lot of prophetic stuff that's out there, is that there's like a transition season in place, and God is sort of bringing people forward. But first, I just want to step back to what you were saying about when you're on the couch. Is it fatigue? Is it something else? I think it's really, really important to point out that it could be a number of things. There's chronic fatigue, there's depression, there is just, I need rest because I'm exhausted. And the thing that you will need to do is not self-diagnose, because I put it down like, it's fatigue from menopause, or it's this or it's that. And I'm happy to talk about that because it's one of the things that women go through. But when I sit down and give myself the time to look at it, it's like, like you just hit the end of a 20-year, very busy season. At the beginning of the pandemic, your daughter got married and both your kids moved out, and all these changes in your business and all this other stuff that happened. It's like, oh man, like that across a lifetime, what happened in a year would have been a lot, but it happened in a year. But if you're watching and you are feeling burnt out, fatigued, or whatever, and questioning what's wrong, go and see a health professional. Go and make sure. So I had, just to talk you through mine so you know what the possibilities are, I had blood tests. My doctor wanted to make sure it wasn't iron deficiency or something like that. She then went through a lot of other questions, and my doctor wants to diagnose me with depression. So I went through that mental health check and ticked the boxes, all but sadness and hopelessness and all those other feelings. And I am a mental health support worker, so I know the drill. I've had depression in the past, and I've had it quite severely. So I know what it feels like. So that's where I can go, I don't actually think it is. I think it's fatigue. It's fatigue and burnout and mental fatigue, because I wake up in the morning and feel like I've had sleeping tablets for breakfast. First thing in the morning, it's like that. But I can still press on. So if you're watching, first encouragement is to go and see a doctor, and then go and have your blood test, have your other things, to just make sure that it's not something that could be helped with, you know, maybe some counseling or maybe some iron tablets, you never know. But also seek God. So I've found that just sitting there and going, God, what's going on for me? What are you trying to tell me something in this moment? Are you trying to just stop me and help me to just find rest in you? Are you just wanting me to stop so that I can start spend time with you? Are you wanting me to stop so I can start depending on you for the energy source and all that sort of stuff? And then wait, like Jim said, which is so hard for a control freak. So hard, right? Yeah.
I wouldn't know. So yes, no, I do get it. No, waiting is something it's really hard, and it feels, especially as an adult, it's like something that you feel, I should be taking responsibility here. This is my life. I should take responsibility for it and do something with it.
Yeah.
So, but sometimes that doing something with it is in fact waiting and resting.
Yes. Yes. Resting is an action. Resting is taking action. And I think that the next question that a lot of people say is, well, for how long? How long should I rest? How long should I wait? How long? For as long as it takes. Honey, cookie, sweetie. Oh, as long as it takes, because God's working on his own timetable as well. So if it is a spiritual rest thing, then, but if you do have that close relationship with God, he'll tell you when to move. And the way he can do that is through different ways, is to either bring opportunities and put them in front of you that says, here's something for you to do. But also you need discernment in that space. Is it a distraction from your rest from the opposition, or is it God saying move forward? So you've got to talk and pray that through. Yeah. But it's also, I think it's a really good time to get in touch with your intuition again and just care for yourself and nurture yourself and listen to yourself. What do I feel like I need in this moment? And what can I learn from this? And usually it's to learn not to be so damn busy. It's not to be such a control freak and have to control every outcome in your life. And also to learn trust and patience with God is a really great opportunity when you're like, I don't know what to do. And I mean, Jim, you've heard me have this conversation for the last 12 months. It's like, I'm not even sure what I'm meant to do next. It's because I'm meant to just stop and wait. When you're completely confused, there's stories like that through the Bible, right? Where God confused the people.
Yep. People of Babel, it's true. Yep.
Yeah. And he's the same now as he was then. So he's going to use all those same strategies and stuff like that. But let's get to we know there's a lot of different things that can cause it, and fatigue and burnout can look like a lot of different things. So, okay, 1, stop and recognize. 2, seek professional help to make sure physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. And then the next step is adjust your lifestyle to meet you where you are.
Yeah.
So that brings us to the quitting thing that you were talking about, Jim. Can you talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, so one of my one of the writers that I'm quite fond of is Bob Goff, and part of his book, he talks about an area that he likes to have, which is a quit it Thursdays, that he says that he actually quits things on Thursday, and he knows enough about himself, about his own personality, that he enjoys taking up things. So he'll get excited about something that somebody might say, and what about this? What about that? You know, so he'll do that. He'll subscribe to things and he'll put those things into his life and make commitments. But then on Thursdays, he has a look at what he's been doing and looking at his calendar and such, and says, you know what, I'm quitting that. Yeah. I'm not doing that anymore. It doesn't, you know, well, what's the Japanese lady's name? Mary, somebody who, Kumo, I think her name is, and she goes through and goes through your house, or goes through your belongings, and says, does this thing, does this thing bring me joy anymore? Yes. Then if it doesn't, then say goodbye to it and get rid of it.
Yeah, I love it.
Same thing. It's quitting it Thursdays or whatever day it might be, but examine things in your life that you're doing, that you're giving your life to, and decide if that is something that you need to quit. And I'm obviously not talking about marital relationships or even kids. Don't quit your kids because they don't bring you joy. Don't quit your partner because they're not making you happy. But there are things that we can do. If you've been doing karate for 5 years now, and it's just, you've had a season of just going, it's just not bringing me what I want anymore, and I don't really want that next belt grading or whatever, quit it.
Yeah.
You're only in competition against yourself.
Yeah.
There is nobody else you're in competition with.
You're not letting anyone else down.
That's right. That's right.
Here's the thing, I think, where people, we hold on to things too tightly. And it may be because we've worked so hard to get it in the first place. We've studied for it. We've worked for it. We've cried for it. So we hold on to it really tightly and we think that we have to keep it, or we think that we're responsible for somebody else. So I find it hard to not have, like, when I was really exhausted, it's like, I should be checking in on this person. I should be checking in on this person. I should be checking. Why? And God's like, you know, Fiona, they're my problem, not yours.
Yeah.
They're mine to take care of, not yours. And so I think it's important to see everything on a spectrum as well. So when we talk about burnout, it might just be a couple of days of tiredness. It might be full-blown wall slapping, knock you on your bum for months burnout. Learning how to identify that first of all, and then learning how to respond in a way that might be just, you know, dial down your to-do list for the next couple of days, or quit an entire thing that you have on your schedule that, like you said, Jim, is not bringing you joy anymore. Have you ever done that? What are the biggest things you've ever quit?
Well, yes, there's quite a few big things that I quit. One of the big things I quit is that I did jiu-jitsu for the better part of 30 years, in fact, more than 30 years.
Yeah.
But even towards the end of that, the last few years of doing that, I just found that it wasn't something that was edifying to me anymore. But it was so hard to quit because I'd tied up so much of my identity was found in that. You know, people knew me in that community. People knew me from a lot of my life as being that person who did that. So to finally get to the position where I quit that was really, really hard to do. But eventually I did. And just thinking about some of the things that I have quit, I've found that it's the easiest way for me personally was to go cold turkey. To just go, I'm quitting that. I'm just not doing that anymore. And every time it comes up or whatever else like that, it's just no. That to me is an easier process than the weaning off process. Because there is that season that you can go through, and it's not a harvest season. Everybody wants to be involved in the harvest because that's exciting. We're doing stuff. There's the settling in season, but there's also the reaping off, or the ending of a season that can really bring with it a whole lot of sadness and grief. And rip off the Band-Aid. Just quit it.
I think that there's two really big important points that you've made there. One is that for two different types of people. For one, it needs to be end it now, and for somebody else, it might be an easier weaning process. But your identity, if your identity is in what you do, then it's going to be a lot harder to let go of. And if you can see the things you do as things you do, not who you are, but also it's also okay. But go, well, that's not entirely who I am. I'm also this, and this. I also have these other things. But also you go, I've put 30 years of work into this training and, you know, learning and stuff like that. So, and anything that is a loss will send you through the grief process. Not just when someone dies, it's losing anything, I went through an entire grief process when my son drove off in a car by himself for the first day. I went through the grieving process of the loss of his dependence on me, first of all. And that I now, like, who am I serving now? Who am I driving around? I still have my other child. But anything that is a loss of something in your life, allow yourself space and grace to grieve. Sad loss. And then once you've passed through that grief season, then start going into what am I gaining? So it's the loss and gain psychology.
Very much agree. Very much agree. And there's a couple of things in that, but just to pick up on that point, if you don't go through a grieving process, or if you insist on making that grieving process a smaller one than what you really need, and just instantly replace it with something else. And often that's what people will do if they're quitting smoking or something like that. It's, what will I do instead of when I go for a smoke? Well, I'm going to eat instead, or whatever else like that. Well, that's one way of supplanting it. Rather than this, I do this now. Or the other way of doing it is to just go cold turkey and go, no, I just don't do that anymore. Well, what do I do instead? Well, I don't know, but I don't do that.
Yeah.
I think that's part of the grieving process, which is a much better way of dealing with it.
Yeah. Healthy.
Yeah, if you have got an addictive personality, it's much easier to just replace one addiction with another.
Yeah, because then you're not actually giving anything up.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. But you're not actually developing anything different.
Yeah.
You're much better off to get yourself, have a divorce from that group.
And be sad about it. Allow yourself to be sad about it. And especially, but not see it as a loss, but look at life as just different seasons. So if you can get your mindset right around it, and I know we're sort of drifting into this, but I think it's really important part of it is to get your mindset around, I'm not going to hold this too tightly because this is me for now. This is mine for now. And I don't know what God has in store for me for the future. I don't know what life has in store for me or what, like you said, what brings me joy in the future. This might bring me joy for now, but then there's a pivot turn. And if you don't allow yourself to let go and grieve and go through that, it's what we're calling these days in positive psychology as toxic positivity. It's like, it's called toxic positivity, where we just bounce from one thing and go, oh, but that's okay. Oh, grandma died, but that's okay. She had a great life. No, it's sad that grandma died, right? Yeah. And then once you've allowed that, then it's like, celebrate the fact that she had a great life, but don't just go straight into she had a great life, right? Yeah. That's toxic positivity.
Yeah.
And it doesn't help us at all. So then our brain, when we're wiring our brain to never be comfortable with grief, because most of all, we're not comfortable with grief. So we're trying to avoid it by replacing it. So a little bit of a sidebar there. But so with quitting stuff, again, it's on the spectrum of how tired are you? What do you need to move on from? What sort of things do you need to quit? Is it part of your to-do list? But I find it really helpful to even just wake up on a daily basis and just go, how am I feeling today? What do I feel capable of today? To set my expectations for the day, because you might have not slept well. You might have, you might not be feeling particularly motivated. You might have had a bad week. So you go, well, I'm not going to go headlong into a massive to-do list if I'm not, because then I'm setting myself up to fail. At the end of the day, I'm going to feel like crap. I'm going to beat myself up, and then that's setting me up for the next day. So a quick example of that, when I started going through like the menopause, well, it's not even menopause, it's menopause, right? I'm like, I can't keep up with the brain function that I had before. So I'm like, well, I was trying to push myself to the level that I needed to be at, until I realized I couldn't do that. I dialed down my life and my expectations and my schedule to what I was capable of doing. Instead of dialing up my energy, which just wasn't possible, I had to dial down my life. So when you can honor yourself and your needs in that way, when you are experiencing burnout, when you are experiencing overwhelm, when you are just fatigued for whatever reason, if you don't know what it is, it's like, what can I do? And like you said, what can I quit? How can I adjust my lifestyle? Because my identity and my value is not placed in my goals and achievements.
No.
Because even if I don't get out of bed today, God still loves me exactly the same.
Correct.
Right? That's the best part about God, right?
Yes.
We don't have to do anything to win the love. It's there. So then what can I do to honor myself and my needs and God at the same time in this season I'm in right now?
Yeah, correct. And I guess that's the point. That's the second point I think I have in mind, and that is from an ethical perspective, it's a virtue ethic, it's a values ethic. And when we're talking about our identity, for Christians, our identity is to be found in Christ. That is our identity. That's who we are. That's why we have a Christian name, is because ultimately it's in Jesus is where we find our identity. Yeah. So you might be the soccer guy or the girl who's awesome at swimming or whatever else. But that's an attachment. No matter how good you are at that thing, that is just an attachment of who you in core are. The real value, the real core of your identity needs to be something other than what you do or what you say or what you're known for. Your
value isn't in what you do. Your value isn't in your goals. And I think that's important. And this is where it all comes to mindset. So it could be something that we've learned from kids. It could be a cultural thing. It could be a family of origin thing. But the mindset around it is, you know what, like it's like failure. If I'm not failing, I'm not trying hard enough. But it's like failure is a really great way to work out what not to do. It's not a identity crushing thing.
Yeah.
God loves you even if you don't get out of bed. So if you don't get out of bed today, like if you never got out of bed for the rest of your life and you've been saved, God still loves you and is still going to heaven. Amen. Hallelujah. But that's a boring life, right? So we want to get up, we want to do things, and we want to be the person God created us to be. Simplifying it is the meaning of life is to find your gifts. Who did God create you to be? What gifts? And you have many, 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 many. The average person has 600 and plus abilities. Find your gifts. Your purpose in life is to give them away. Right. Find your gifts. Are you an encourager? Are you a carer? Are you whatever? So it's about dialing back the complicated that we have brought into our current modern day lifestyle and culture, the busyness, the overachieving. I shouldn't say overachieving, that's kind of a negative way, the high achieving. And there's nothing wrong with, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with being a high achiever, but not at the cost of your health and well-being. So it's, it's identifying that, yeah, Jesus got in a boat and went out into the middle of the lake just to get away from the people and the noise because he was tired and he needed rest. That should be telling us that we need to retreat from the crowds and have time out and time away as well. And again, it might be for an hour, it might be for a day, it might be a whole year of sabbatical, which is quite frankly what I think I need at the moment. It's been a while. But just to use that time to draw on God, use that time to draw on his energy. Let God do the heavy lifting for you and just go, rightio, I'm going to just rest in your arms right now. And you are the source of all my supply, God. So when you're ready to give me energy, I'll get energy. I'll draw from it. You then teach me, give me wisdom, pray for wisdom and knowledge in that time so that God can show you. And if he's not showing you anything, it's because he just wants you to rest and sit and be okay with that until what he's teaching you in that moment is patience, dependence, and faith that he's got this. You don't need to.
Yeah.
Preaching to myself here right now because I'm going through this as well. But yeah, I just really feel like that there is a lot of burnout going on. There's a lot of, because we have that mindset and that wiring of busy, 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 we've created a culture of busyness that life was meant to be simple. God gave Adam and Eve this entire beautiful garden. Just tend to the garden. There's your food. There's your animals. There's all the beauty all around you. Enjoy. And then somehow we got from there to here where everything is rush, 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 busy, busy, busy.
Yep. Working 70 hours.
How do we start undoing that a little bit? And I'm not expecting an answer to that. It's like, let's all sit back in our own worlds and go, how can I dial that back to the simplicity that God intended for us? The enjoyment of life, the joy, like you said, the joy in doing what we're doing, the time to sit down and watch our children's faces, the time to connect with each other and just have conversations that aren't transactional, that are just, being there, that aren't for a purpose or a reason.
Yeah. And
just start to enjoy life again.
Very important. Yeah, that's great.
I think there's something in that for all of us.
It probably is.
Who used to say that? I think there's something in that for all of us. It was one of those old TV show hosts. Looking at the time, yes. So I think that's a really good conversation to open up. And even if you at home watching, has that conversation, if you recognize this or recognize it in yourself or someone else in your family or your friends, open up a conversation about it and go, what do you think? Like we just watched, those two nutters, Fiona and Jim, talking about this. What's your take on it? What could we do as a family to dial down and live more and enjoy more rather than do more? Yeah. What do I need to do? And then, of course, by all means, sit back and just have some quiet time with God. Go into your room and say, what do you want me to do in response to this tiredness? What do you want from me? What can I do for you? Yeah.
Great advice. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yes.
I hope that's given you something to think about.
Yeah.
Please rest.
Yes.
Please know that you're loved and enjoy your life.
Yes, indeed. And if you've got any comments or questions, feel free to put them in the comment section below and we're always happy to answer them. But thank you so much again for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.